due to the state of emergency declared by Governor Scott as a result of COVID-19 pandemic and pursuant to Addendum 6 to the Executive Order 01-20 and Act 92. This public body is authorized to meet electronically. In accordance with Act 92, there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with the temporary amendments to the open meeting law, I confirm that we are providing access to the meeting via Zoom with a telephone number to contact if you are unable to access the meeting. All members of the public will be able to speak, and Roger will instruct the public body on how to raise your hand electronically. And all votes will be roll call, and I want to confirm that I am Claudette Brochu. Actually, it's 6:34 on the 29th of December. The 9th of December, 2020. Claudette Brochu, Chair. I'm joined by Roger Arnold, Mary Layton, John Langus, Rob Gear, our select board, Herb Manager, our town manager, Miranda Bergmeyer, his assistant, and various members of the public. Roger, you're...
Yes. So I was laughing because Herb is Herb Manager, town manager, which is
Did I say that?
It's excellent. I love it. It's great. So to participate via the Zoom platform, please go to participants, and then you will see an option to raise your hand. That will alert me that you would like to make a comment, and then I will inform Claudette. And please wait to be recognized with name and locatable address. If you are participating by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand, and then when recognized, press *6. Yes. So that's it. Someone has their physical hand up.
If the members, for any members of the public who are going to speak, I need you to state your name and locatable address. Mason, did you have? That's the name attached to.
Yeah, Mason Dwinell, 1169 New Boston Road. Norwich,
If there is a after we approve our agenda, there's an opportunity for the public to present some public comments. Is there something that you needed to address before that? Stuart, I see your hand.
I'm not sure. I'm new to this. I'm learning the terminology. In discussion with her, I just wanted to begin the discussion of binding zoning ordinance regarding guns in Norwich.
Cool. So the oh, sorry, Claudette, I'm usurping your duties. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say then we'll address your comment at public comments.
Okay.
But no physical hands, y'all. So go to participants, and then when you push participants, there'll be an option to raise your hand. So I'm sorry to insist on this decorum, but it creates a lot of functionality for us. So Stuart, I love seeing your physical hand, but if you go to participants and raise your hand, that will help me. Yes, you just did it. Thank you so much. Sorry to insist.
So is there something that could not wait for public comments, Stuart?
Yeah, sweet.
Stuart's frozen.
That have been published. There's a link on the agenda that doesn't work for me. Apparently it works for other people. Herb sent me a link and it's a different link. And that has allowed me to join this meeting. I don't have the answer to this. I wish I knew more about internet technicalities, but I think that it's something that you do need to address for future meetings so that the agenda link does work. And
so, Stuart, I'm going to stop you right there for a second. The agenda link did work for everybody that's in this meeting currently.
If you look at what I sent, you will see that there are two different links. The letters are different. I can't explain why, but.
Okay, Stuart, thank you. I can't tell you, I can't explain why either. I'm not sitting there with you with your computer. But the select board has opted to continue the meeting. And with that, we're going to go to the first item on the agenda, which is approval of the agenda. Any additions, subtractions? Herb, just to let you know, the citizens assistants and the DPW assistant computer is in the consent agenda.
Okay, so I knew that they were in there, but I know that you, with regard to the designated fund itself, typically you like the approval outside of that. But so that's why I had a little panic attack this afternoon, because I thought that I'd moved it forward, but didn't. So
Yep.
I did send an email earlier to folks with because it didn't make the motion sheet,
Okay.
that I did send a motion. So if
Yep.
you needed that.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I'm not seeing any select board members. Okay. So moving on, we'll go on to the public or select board comments. Now, Mason, if you'd like to speak, go right ahead.
So, I can lower hand. Yeah, I just wanted to have introduced to the town of Norwich a potential for a binding zoning ordinance outlining gun use in Norwich.
Okay. If you have a proposal, if you could submit it to the town manager so that it can be included in our select board correspondence, so that we can see what you might be thinking.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Any other public comments?
Stuart has his hand up, and then Mary Layton.
Stuart, go ahead.
Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. There were two questions that I had. One concerns the Green Fleet Working Group. I'm not sure if this is a question for Herb or a question for the Select Board, but if anybody can answer it, I would certainly appreciate it. And the question is, will this Green Fleet Working Group observe and fully implement the open meeting law? I had one other question after the answer to this.
Herb, that's your group, so
Yep, no, I had my hand up. I'm sorry, I'm drawing the line. All I'm doing is asking for some help from some individuals on helping me prepare an internal protocol with regard to Green Fleet and how we put our requests together for the select board. If the select board opts to do a Green Fleet policy, that's a whole different story. But I'm just seeking input from some various individuals in town. So I am not going to be announcing this as part of an open meeting law thing. This is just part of my regular duties, Stuart.
So what John Lang has sent me is at variance with what you're saying. And I don't know if John has any further comment.
go ahead, John.
So I think that those are consistent. So the working group is, I think, sort of pre-policy, right? So the working group would be thinking about things like how we should think about putting a charter together, right? For a policy, committee, and whether we need one or whether we just have a policy document that then goes and is informs energy committee stuff or whatever. Like what Herb's talking about is very early stage, just brainstorming stuff. I think it's consistent also that I said that I don't think that it's technically subject to the open meeting law regardless, but that depending on what it was doing, we would maybe decide to make it act as though it were subject to the open meeting law. So I don't think it's good to set us against each other here. I told you in the email that I was not speaking for anyone but myself. I felt like there were people that kept asking this question, so nothing had happened about this yet. So I wanted to give you some sort of answer. So I'd like that not to be used against me if possible.
I'm not trying to use anything against anyone. I'm just trying to find out what direction the select board is going to take with respect to the open meeting law and the establishment of these groups. And I would hope that the select board would try and follow the open meeting law as closely as they can. And where there's any question about whether the open meeting law needs to be observed, that you err on the side of following the open meeting law. So my second question was, how much has been spent on attorneys, or how much will be spent on attorneys with respect to the education seminar that was held, and also on the planning commission work that lawyers did for the planning commission in response to the open meeting law and the planning commission?
That I'm sure Herb can get you the answer, but
So can I rephrase the question? So just to be clear, so you're asking how much public money has been spent on taking actions that you have lodged against the governing bodies? Just to be clear, that might be another way to phrase that question. You're asking how much public money was spent on processes that you've initiated?
Yeah, I haven't lodged anything. All I've done is, I object to the way you're phrasing that. What I would say is that there were various things that were done by the planning commission during the town plan process that appeared certainly to violate the open meeting law. And the planning commission responded to the suggestions that there were violations. And a lawyer was engaged. There was no lawyer that was engaged with respect to the comments that were made before the lawyer was engaged. And then there was additional money that was spent for 2 attorneys to hold I don't know if you want to call it a seminar or what you'd like to call it, but there were 2 attorneys that were engaged to provide open meeting law information and opinions on the part of the two attorneys. So I just like to know how much was spent in that effort, or even if it hasn't been billed yet, how much the expectation will be for those expenses.
okay. Herb can probably get you that when we receive invoices, but I'm not going to debate opinions about if we are or are not currently following the open meeting law, because I feel we are. So, but thank you for your comment. Any other public comments?
Mary and Herb both have their hands up.
Oh, that's right, Mary, sorry. Go right ahead.
I just wanted to know if it's sort of a suggestion for an agenda item, if we could review our the type of Zoom that we have, and also find out from Miranda just the time that is needed to post the open meeting law minutes and so forth in a timely way. I just would like to know what kind of impact that's having on town administration, so that we, for instance, when I'm on this childcare committee, I want everything about that to be transparent. But just thinking that I also don't want to overburden Miranda. There may be a way to structure the Zoom or to get a different account so that committee chairs could post the information in a more timely way. So I just, at some point, maybe as a board, we could talk about whether we want to have that type of agenda item.
Okay. And Herb, you had a comment? I think Mary, we've talked about upgrading our Zoom account.
I think we have, yes.
Yeah. So, okay. Herb?
So just, yes, I can get invoices to indicate what the cost of the open meeting law training was, as well as anything else that we dealt with the planning commission on a number of issues. I don't think all of them have come in. There was one that came in, I think, last week, so I'll have to check that one to see. if it has all of the open meeting training on there. So that's not a problem. And then I'm not, yeah, I had another comment, which I'm going to refrain from talking about.
Okay. Any other public or select board comments?
Rob has his hand up. Rob Gear.
Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to point out, for instance, that open meeting law training was widely attended and applicable to anyone on the select board, in town governance, and working on volunteering on committees. It was a fabulous training opportunity that I hope will be repeated, just to make people aware of what the requirements are. I don't think they're specific to any really necessarily specific to any issue.
Thank you, Rob. And anything?
I don't see any Zoom hands raised.
Sorry, Stuart.
Now I do.
Go right ahead, Stuart. You're muted.
Join the meeting.
You're still muted, Stuart.
Ability to unmute myself, I don't
I
think.
unmuted you, Stuart. Go
Thank
ahead.
you for unmuting me. Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. I'd like to suggest to you that you, before you upgrade Zoom or do anything more with Zoom, that you consider Microsoft Teams as an alternative, if you haven't already. It's, we have found in my company that it's very effective, inexpensive, and it works better than Zoom. No limitation on the number of people or on anything else. So just a suggestion.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have their blue hand raised? Okay, moving on then to appointments to open positions. Is there a motion to appoint Robert Haynes Jr. to the Child Care Committee?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
So motion made by Mary, seconded by John. I don't see Robert here, but Mary, do you want to speak to his application?
Yes, I think when we formed that
Join
charge,
the meeting.
when we formed up the charge for the Child Care Committee, we wanted to have a representative from the business community. We were trying to balance out the committee between educators, advocates, and sort of business interests. Bob has been working up in Randolph in his capacity for the Green Mountain Economic Development Council. He helped to the city of Randolph or the town of Randolph to create a 100 child facility up there using grant money and creating a nonprofit. He's just very interested in this topic, and he's had some experience in other municipalities. So I think he'd be a valuable addition to the group, and he's very excited to apply.
Any select board comments? Seeing none, I'm going to roll call. Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. And thank you to Rob for stepping up. Then moving on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? And then my recommendation is that we tie in the motions for the
Number 7, like the
Yeah.
ICS.
no, not the ICS, the
Citizen assistance.
citizen assistance.
Was there one other?
And I thought I don't see anything on the motion sheet.
Wasn't there one other item that
Yeah, it
was,
was $600 something for the administrative office equipment, computer, laptop. But the laptop, I believe, was coming from just operational funds. So if there's a motion to approve the consent agenda, and then we'll do a separate motion right afterwards to approve the designated fund expenditure, the citizens assistance designated fund expenditure. Does that sound good to everybody?
I think so.
Okay.
So it doesn't need to be pulled out, right?
I don't think so. Herb, do you think it should be pulled and voted separately?
I don't think so at all, no, but I was trying to be respectful of past discussions.
yeah.
That's all. Yeah.
My wish that designated fund appropriations not get stuck in the consent agenda. I hear you.
In other words, I defer to the chair.
All right, well, I'm willing to move that.
Please do.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none. Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mary,
Yes,
Rob,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and Claudette's a yes. And the added motion to approve the $3,000 expenditure from the Citizen Assistance Designated Fund.
I move to approve the authorization of $3,000 from the Citizens Assistance Fund as described in the December 9th packet.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by John. Any discussion? Seeing none. Roger?
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
sorry, just for purposes of the record, that the $3,000 would be to pay Germs Plumbing and Heating for half the cost of the furnace replacement for a resident household in need. Just so to further clarify what it's for.
Okay, thank you. Roger?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes,
John?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
You've shifted on my screen, Rob. You're trying to, and Claudette's a yes. Thank you. Now, I put outside appropriations on here just because we hadn't talked. We know that anybody coming for an increase in their appropriation, we wanted to hear from them. As well as anybody requesting a new appropriation. So my purpose is to just listen to their request and not to move anything tonight. I think that can be done as part of the greater budget discussion, but to at least get some info. So I see two people that I don't know, and I don't know if they're here to talk about an appropriation. So Herb, do you know?
The two people that are here for the computer request later on.
Okay. So we did not receive any ballots or, okay, so well, since there's nobody here, okay, we're good.
We have until when is the date that folks have to for petitions? It's not.
Some date in January, toward the tail end of January.
So we may.
Okay.
And
All right. Well,
the general rule of thumb that I'm passing along to folks is that your policy still remains in effect despite the COVID era.
right. Okay. the town manager's report is next. Anybody, any select board members have a question about the town manager's report? Sorry, I just lost my Zoom screen.
I have a question for her.
Go ahead, Roger.
So Herb, when can we expect the next output, or what is the logical output from that training that we received and that was just referenced earlier during public comment? Would we, is the expectation that we will have defensible legal advice for being able to proceed in regards to working groups and other committees? I mean, one of the things I was prepared to state, for example, was, well, I won't say that because in respect to Claudette's earlier point about not getting into that discussion. So what is the next conclusion for that? I felt like it was useful. I echo what Rob Gear said, but I would like an output from that. Do you expect that?
Sorry, so of course, the initial reaction for all of this that started all this, of course, are the number of definite violations that's occurred over the last few years, and some perceptions, for lack of a better term, that we've had some open meeting law violations. So as we all agreed, the intent of having the training was to have a uniform update for folks in the community that are on boards, commissions, elected offices, appointed, and staff. It was not intended to be attended by members of the public, of which there was one. There was a two-pronged approach. One was to provide a general open meeting law, logistical, here's what it is, here are the general things that you deal with. But secondly, and probably more importantly, we tried to tailor it to some of the specific questions that people would have so that we could make it as meaningful to the various boards, commissions, and individuals as possible, rather than just being a traditional logistical, here's what the law says and is, and what you should do. So what we tried to do is have some sort of applications, if you will, that are sensitive to the town to deal with them. So that's why there was probably what I would call an extra burden placed on the individuals that provided the training, which would result in an extra cost than normal than just doing their traditional rollout of a presentation of the open meeting law. Excuse me. What I think needs to occur now thereafter is at some point, probably shortly after you do your appointments during your reorg meeting, there should be a regular either some kind of an orientation handout or something for new appointees, and certainly if there are existing appointees and elected officials that require the thing. But I do think that there should be some kind of at least a regular handout reminder, and then occasionally, as you may determine, another form of training that either picks up where we left off or is just more of that regular, here's what the open meeting law is, here are the types of things that fit the law or not. And the other underlying or the undertow to the training was specifically having our attorneys do it, because we wanted to make sure that what they were training us on is what they're willing to defend for us in court. So for instance, Vermont League of Cities and Towns has a very good presentation on the open meeting law. And frankly, they use folks like our firm to provide that sort of stuff. But it is a little bit more generic standpoint and doesn't necessarily fit exactly with the way that our attorneys interpret some of the finer points of the open meeting law. A good example is exactly one of the issues that came up tonight. There are some individuals, probably at the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, that think that essentially more things, because they provide a more conservative interpretation of the statute, because they have to address 250 communities of all different shapes and sizes, versus our attorney is only providing advice, legal advice, and training advice as it pertains to Norwich alone. juxtaposed with a statute. So that's why I think there's some subtlety of interpretation for, I don't mean to use subtlety in a derogatory sense, but there can be some subtlety of interpretation between and among attorneys as it relates to the open meeting law. And with some of the issues that have arisen in, at least since I've been here, I do think that there is a, we do have to draw the line in the sand or split the hair in certain instances. And that's why I said what I said earlier tonight. But that may not be in keeping with the perspective of either sometimes a generic, something that comes out of the Secretary of State, or a generic thing that comes out of the Vermont League of Citizens. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yes, and then just my one follow-up question, if I may, is so any actions relating, we can assume that the public can assume that any actions relating to our meetings have had the benefit of that legal advice, and we are following our lawyer's legal advice in the open meeting law. That can be the assumption from this point forward, going forward. So when we say, so when the town of Norwich, Herb Durfee, says that we are not in violation of open meeting law, the members of the public can assume that that has the benefit of our legal counsel's review.
In my opinion, yes.
Excellent, thank you. Rod Francis has his hand up, Claudette.
Go ahead, Rod.
Hello, this is Rod.
Name, full name, and
yeah, my address is Tracy Hall. It's Rod Francis. To be clear, the advice that I received from Joe McLean, both before and after the training that was provided to members of boards and commissions, was that there's enough gray area in the application of the open meeting law, and there's an absence of case law to help attorneys to come to clear conclusions. And so his strongest recommendation is that at any point when an existing commission or board contemplates the formation of a working group or a subdivision of itself as an entity, that you seek direct advice from the attorneys as to whether it's subject to open meeting law or not. They can give advice on how to structure your work program and affairs so that you're in compliance with open meeting law, and that would be a review of your current structure and program of operations. But his suggestion, his strongest suggestion, is that at any time that you contemplate doing something different, including forming a working group or some other subset of the board or commission that you're a part of, that you actually seek advice from attorneys as to whether it's subject to open meeting law and how then to comply with open meeting law.
Well, that'll just ensure that they stay in business. Like that is bizarre, but anyway, I mean, I was hoping for a legal memo that can be put on the website. It's defensible, and if, quite frankly, and respectfully, if we don't have suitable case law, then someone may need to make it, right? Like I want Norway to have a defensible point of view, but it sounds like where we're at is we've gotten some training, we've learned some things. Going forward, we should decide on a case-by-case basis, but we can assume that Herb Durfee and other town officials have the benefit of that consultation when they make these decisions.
Yes, the only point that I would make clear there is that I think that each instance has unique circumstances and would justify a quick consultation with the attorney in each instance.
Okay.
So I think the notion that you could, for instance, establish some kind of document that contains definitions or a clear policy is going to be a challenge given the way the law is structured and the lack of case law, which is the way you would go about clarifying statute. And so in the instance of the recent planning commission efforts, the conclusion from council and the conclusion of the Attorney General's office when they were asked to intervene was that there was not enough substance to justify the Attorney General's office's intervention, and that it was not clear, in fact, that there had been a violation of open meeting law.
Okay, I truly just wanted to know next steps, so I'll step back.
Yep.
With,
Yep, sure. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say here is that, at least from the attorney's point of view, the next steps would be get in the habit of checking with the attorneys as to whether you, what you're proposing to do is consistent with open meeting law as it's currently understood.
Well, I'd sooner go to law school myself. Okay, well, great.
Yep.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
It's getting cheaper and easier. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Any other questions for the town manager? Roger, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
And you know,
It's okay.
yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think probably March would be a really, really good time to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
John and Herb have their hands up.
If I may briefly, you know, as much as many of my best friends are lawyers, I do think that the idea, and you see this a lot, where lawyers say, well, the best thing to do is to just come ask me before you do every single thing that you do. And I promise not to overbill you for that. And it's different if you're a private person or a business, you know. There are fewer people relying on you for consistency, right? And I think that's maybe what you're going for a little bit, Roger, is that there's the substance of making sure we're doing the right thing, but there's also the day-to-day practicality of just people knowing how to conduct themselves if they're appointed or elected officials on the one hand, and what to expect if you're a member of the public who is seeking participation with those folks. And so I don't think, with all due respect, that it's not possible to come up with something that's a broad framework for keeping on the both correct and good side of this question. Certainly 9 times out of 10, except for when there's like maybe a hard question. And you know, by doing that, if we are a little bit on the conservative side, that probably helps that. But, you know, one way to interpret the lack of case law is that people in general don't see a problem, right? They don't see a problem worthy of litigating this. And, you know, I don't know where we sit amongst the various towns in Vermont in terms of how we do under this regime, but my suspicion is that we are, you know, as good as anybody. We spend a lot of time thinking about it, so I hope that we're doing a better job than a lot of folks. But I do, you know, keep in mind that it may just be that people have concluded that it's more or less doing its job.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions about the town manager's report?
2 things, Madam Chair, as the town manager.
Oh, sorry, Herb, sorry.
And then Mary has her hand up as
Just
well.
2 things as the town manager. One, any requests for the town attorney needs to go through my office first, and that sort of is tangential to or intertwined with what Mr. Langus just talked about. So that helps to minimize the costs. And also, if we already have an opinion on one thing, we shouldn't have to go and get the same opinion again. That we've got that sort of clearinghouse of information. The other thing is just, I sent you an email earlier today that I just want to make sure that you're aware in your meeting that unfortunately and very disappointingly, the latest round of finance director interviews and stuff failed. So we had 3 good candidates that could handle the position. I will defer you to my email, but I'm asking Madam Chair that you allow me. I know that I would like to have this as an agenda item tonight due to the importance of it, but by not being able to do that, I would just ask if the board would be okay with me collaborating with Mary and Roger, since they were part of the last 2 processes with the interview process and everything, to come up with at least potentially an immediate interim solution to handle this, while also trying to figure out the longer term future. I'm cannot tell you how disappointed I am.
Board thoughts?
Would we have to warn it? Like, sorry, I have such cynicism with our former answer. Yeah, no, it is that is unfortunate, Herb, but I'm happy to give some thinking to some of your suggestions.
I am as well.
Any objections from the other? Me either. So hopefully, yeah. Roger, Mary, and Herb will be tasked to
Kind of figure it out.
figure it out, or
Yeah.
interim figure out, or whatever. Yeah, okay. Just one more thing. So, anything else? Mary, did you have your hand up?
I did. It was just to say again on the open meeting law, just to make sure we're not taxing the administrative assistant too much in having to post agendas and minutes and so forth. There might be a little bottleneck there that I think we should just keep our eye on in order to stay in compliance. There's a physical amount of stuff you have to do to stay in compliance that's time sensitive. And, you know, Miranda has other things to do. So.
Right, and I'm wondering with the, one thing with the minutes that, that's not a Zoom thing, that's just some committee member being able to access however you post all that stuff on the listserv, on the website.
Yes, and I think Roger mentioned that with a Zoom upgrade that might, well, another conversation, that it might be possible to sort of separate out the committee chairs so they could post the minutes and so forth. But it would require, I think, a Zoom upgrade, but maybe he can speak to that.
But it's on our, we need to talk about further.
Right.
Right.
Okay, I'm sure we
Okay.
can figure it out.
Anything else? No, if not, then going to move on to the next agenda item, which is approve the insured cash sweep proposal and the small business checking proposal. And there are motions, and what I really want to avoid, I mean, we had a memo from her, we had a response from Cheryl. And these are 6 distinct items we can do right now, or actually retroactive to what occurred in September. So is anybody willing to start making motions?
Yeah, and I will do that. And so we're going to go down all of them, I would assume, right?
We'll do one at a time.
Okay.
Yep.
So I move to authorize the town treasurer to open an FDIC insured cash sweep ICS account under the name Town of Norwich, Vermont, with Mascoma Bank to help ensure full collateralization of town funds. Such authorization to be retroactive to September 3rd, 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any discussion? Roger's raising or shaking his head no. So Mary, or actually Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Rob, you flip back to where you were before. Rob?
Yes.
Right, John?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes.
Okay.
Next.
So just go down through here.
Yeah, if you're willing.
Sure. I move to authorize the town treasurer to open a small business checking SBC account under the name Town of Norwich, Vermont, with Mascoma Bank. Such authorization to be retroactive to September 3rd, 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
Made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any discussion? Seeing none. Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and Claudette's a yes. Next
Okay.
one.
I move to authorize the expenditure of any funds necessary to open and maintain the ICS and SBC accounts, such authorization to be retroactive to September 3rd, 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
Made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any discussion? Seeing none. No hands raised. Roger,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and Claudette's a yes. You willing to keep going, Mary?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. I move to authorize the town treasurer to transfer $3 million from the town's checking account held with Mascoma Bank to the newly opened Mascoma ICS via the newly opened SBC account, such authorization to be retroactive to September 3rd, 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any discussion? Roger's shaking his head no. Roger,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
and I'm not sure if John is just John,
Yes.
and Claudette's a yes.
Okay. Here's the next one. I move to authorize the town treasurer to transfer $500,000 from the ICS back to the town's checking account held with Mascoma Bank via the Mascoma SBC account, such authorization to be retroactive to September 28th, 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none. Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and Claudette's a yes.
Okay, last one. I move to authorize the town treasurer to transfer $1 million from the ICS back to the town's checking account held with Mascoma Bank via the Mascoma SBC account, such authorization to be retroactive to December 1st, 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
Made
Clean
by
sweep.
Mary, seconded by Rob. Any discussion?
I actually have one, even though I made the motion. The motion is written, the authorization to be retroactive to December 1st, 2020. Then there's a bracket that says, or other date if applicable. I'd like to ask why it was framed that way. Maybe
That's a
Herb or
Herb
Bill.
question.
Just originally, we were trying to nail down the date. So when we had started drafting that, so the December 1st is fine.
That's the correct date. Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion?
No.
Seeing none. Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and Claudette's a yes. Thank you, everyone. That brings us to our break, and I'm sorry you guys from SimQuest are sitting through this. It's riveting Zoom material, isn't it?
I'm having a blast.
Okay. So it's 7:22, 10 minutes brings us to 7:32.
Okay.
Back then. Rob Gear, John Langus, and myself, and as well as our town manager and his assistant, Miranda Bergmeyer. and members of the public. Next item on our agenda is the request for authorization. Let me see. A request to authorize the town manager to go to bid for up to $30,000 for new server and computer workstations with related software and installation of said equipment and software. Anyone willing to move that motion?
So moved.
There's a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any, Herb, do you want to tee up the discussion?
Sure, would be
If there
happy.
is any?
Yep, so we have two people that are here representing SimQuest today. We have Tony Williams, who did the actual assessment for the computers all throughout Tracy Hall. He's the one that identified all the exclamation points and the reds and all that sort of stuff that we need, that are vulnerabilities. And then Carrie, with her team, with the help of Anthony as well, has prepared an overall proposal to deal with dealing with all of the vulnerabilities and the general updates that we need to deal with. You have received both sets of those informations in a packet in the past. What you have for tonight is, what we're trying to do is move forward with addressing the most important vulnerabilities at this point, which essentially is replacing the server, 3 of the workstations, and then related hardware, software, peripherals is the term that I use. And then we can talk about IT support on top of that, but, and the licenses. So, and you can talk about IT support on top of that, because there are different options that are out there. And that information to do that work was essentially sent to you by separate email from the packet, because what I want to do is, we still have to get bids out there. I wanted to protect the integrity of the bidding process by not publicly putting out what the estimates are for SimQuest at this point, because what they've tried to do is essentially be our a helpful consultant in preparing the information that we need to do to address the vulnerabilities that came up in the assessment. And that's part of their normal operations. They do understand that there is no guarantee, even though they've provided the work, that they will get the contract. I'm not stupid. They obviously have a leg up in what it is, but the idea will be that I will go out and get competitive bids for that. So the proposal before you is to address replacing the server, 3 workstations at Tracy Hall, the related hardware, software, peripherals, user license for that. That's the total that's in all of those costs. And the 2, Tony and Carrie, are here to help answering questions, to provide better insight into it, because there is a healthy amount of information in beyond. I mean, it's easier to say than in the proposal language or the estimate language that's out there. So if there is some additional information you would like to hear for them besides what I'm offering, they are here. And whether you want to hear a little bit of a presentation from Tony, remind you that we're not an executive session, so we don't want to throw out there publicly what our risks. But if there's a way to generally summarize that, that would be helpful. And then Carrie, if we want to get into any of the proposal stuff, she's here to do that. So, Madam Chair, I would just say, to what degree do you want to get into the meat of this?
Board thoughts? Any questions from Mary?
Sorry, didn't raise my little blue hand there. Yeah, I agree with moving forward in this direction, and would kind of want some information or reassurance about what the transition will be like when the old computers go out and the new ones go in and the data is transferred and so forth. What will happen at Tracy Hall?
So I don't know if Carrie or Tony are able to provide that info or best estimate or best guess or.
Might be a Herb question too. I mean, does everything that's town government shut down for a day or two or what?
So I can at least start with basically saying that what we're trying to do right now is sort of like the first phase of the transition of essentially all of our computers out, and that the budget that you had, the proposed budget that you have before you is trying to raise additional funds to deal with the latter part of the phase in from that standpoint. But the most important vulnerability situation right now is the server and 3 specific computers that are woefully out of date, especially their software. And then I'll leave it up to Carrie and Tony to go from there.
Okay, that didn't address my question. I'll like to hear more from the consultants.
Carrie, before you speak, Roger, you had a comment
Well, I guess,
or a question?
well, I know that some preparatory work has been put into it, and with that, like, approach has been decided. So I don't want to, like, you know, have this be perceived as taking a step back. But I think, like, one of the questions in a presentation, one of the questions I might have is, well, you know, why have our own server at all? You know, why are we nimble enough to be cloud-based, for instance? You know, like, what are some of the advantages to, like, acquire this much hardware for a staff of our size? And then what would be obviously it helps with scaling, right? So, but, you know, I don't think we plan on massively scaling up too much. Obviously you may have had those questions or conversations with Herb, but I guess, does the server then provide certain accessibility for people who are working remotely? You know, so 2 questions, like, why own the hardware of a server? What are some of the advantages of that when so many organizations are getting nimble with the cloud as it is? And then the second question is, does having the server provide the flexibility to work remotely and be more nimble and innovative and all these tech words? So those are my questions.
And then Mary's question to that is transition, how that would
How it works.
how it would work. Now go, please, if you can answer any of those, Carrie.
Perfect. I just want to make sure I could jump in before I went ahead and jumped in. So Carrie from SimQuest, I am also a resident of the town of Norwich. So to answer the questions in terms of cloud versus on-premise, we're actually proposing a hybrid solution. The reason we're proposing a hybrid solution is because of applications that are in use by the town prevent you from going fully to the cloud. So we're proposing hybrid by putting in files, utilizing Microsoft 365, which allows remote access to those files as well. And then with the on-prem server, we would be able to do a VPN connection in to utilize those applications that need to be used with the on-premise server. In terms of downtime with the transition to the new server, we like to take the server offline and do any sort of offline transition after hours as much as possible. So we would plan it out for, say, 5 o'clock on a set day during the week to go ahead and pull that server down, make the transition over to the new server, and have you back up and running by the next morning.
With testing of some sort, like how do you know that everything's working correctly?
Yes, we'd be going through and testing and making sure everything is good. And then we would also have engineers on standby the next morning as everyone comes back in and starts logging on to make sure that everything is working correctly.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board?
What does
John?
Rob think of it?
Well, John had his hand and then we'll go to Rob.
Rob had his hand up, yeah.
I'd just be interested at what applications we have that we're using that prevent us from doing a fully cloud-based system, and whether we should consider upgrading those as well. suspecting that one of them might be Nimric.
That would be, one of them would be Nimric.
I like
yes.
John. I like John. He gets it.
But we do have NEMRIC remotely right now. We do pay for that service.
For fear of going too specific here, I believe you have an SS Pro application that also runs internally on one of those servers. You do have some file shares that exist where workflow for folks inside the town rely on that currently. Until you transition over, I think the server and its infrastructure, it's a good path to go hybrid. It also gives you time to make decisions as you go along. Do this methodically, one piece at a time. Not a good idea to change everything all at once at all. You want to do things, plan it out and make sure there's least impact onto production day to day for you folks.
Any other questions? Rob, please, your input.
So one of the advantages of being hybrid like that is that you're closing yourself off to fewer avenues of advancing. If you have, if we were to find some aspect of some program, some application that was a benefit to the town, but didn't run well in the cloud or would be much more expensive to run in the cloud, having that option to do it locally on the server could be of benefit. It may very well be that I was going to suggest that a slight change in the language would be, right now it sounds very much as if it's defined to be an on-site server, hardware server. But I think it's a good idea to leave that open to further study and further bidding as to whether or not SimQuest or whoever else might be involved in bidding can recommend a ideal cloud-based circumstance. Getting it out of the building, the significant advantages would be that we don't have to worry about bandwidth of internet access, because we want to make records as available to the public as possible to improve the website and make it more interactive. But if we are in the building, you have the risk to the building itself, plus the limitations of people being able to access it quickly.
Any response or any further comment? I must say, I'm looking to somebody else for what to do, because I am not even going to begin to try to claim that I know what the heck it's going to, that I know IT systems enough to even ask an intelligent question. So.
I have one other question, but Tony has his hand up.
Oh, Tony, go ahead. Sorry.
Yep, that's fine. I do think that if we were to kind of review the assessment with you, keep in mind this is tailor-made for people who aren't as technical. In many cases, we get brought in from folks who maybe their IT person has abandoned them, maybe they're being abused by their current provider. So we tailor-make this to be consumable by no matter what your technical acumen may be. So when you start to see some of the specifics and some of our concerns, including the red flags in particular, it kind of adds a sense of urgency. So yeah, we kind of tailor-make this assessment to create a base of awareness so that we can kind of paint a best practices picture for you folks. And that's where these plans are coming from. So when Carrie builds these remediation plans and transition plans, we're keeping best practices and security in mind, while also kind of responding to anything that's out of scope or out of practice. For instance, end of life operating systems, right, on servers, or if you've got old Windows OSs, when an operating system goes end of life, it becomes a hole, it becomes a risk. And when you start to kind of look at the articles and all the municipalities that have been hacked in the past, what you find is that the cleanup is often just as expensive as the ransom, as an example of that. And if municipalities had just better repaired and maybe added line items for some of these infrastructures over the years, you would have been better prepared for those moments. And we actually have stories of those too, where cities were better prepared and the cleanup was significantly less for those moments where, you know, you've got some service provider assisting you, or you really put your priority into cybersecurity. I don't know if I answered the question, but long story short, you know, that assessment, once you dig into the details, it becomes clear what we're looking at here. You know, you don't know where you're going to go in the future until you know where you are today. That assessment creates that picture.
Roger, you had a follow-up?
No, I don't actually. Well, I thought I did. I mean, yeah, I guess I appreciate the point about I guess one of my struggles, which is a little uneducated because I don't know like the IT like landscape and the way that like Rob and you folks do. But you know, part of my instincts is just, you know, I hear Microsoft 365, maybe this is generational. I hate generational ideas, but I hear Microsoft 365 and I'm like immediately cringing because I haven't used a Microsoft product in like a decade probably, right? Like I'm using G Suite tools and everything is cloud-based. But obviously like that might not be what's in the best interest of like our town's employees' uses. And then like in the suggestion earlier of Teams, like also made me like, you know, no Teams, which is just so I don't, but I almost don't want to get locked into anything one way or another. So does your assessment provide that sort of nimbleness where, you know, you could have a suite of Microsoft products and software and then, you know, over time make that transition, which would be like to a G Suite platform, which is, you know, increasingly more manageable for municipalities?
So think of Microsoft 365 very similar to the G Suite. So it's operated on a very similar platform. The benefit with how we would be setting it up is that things would be completely synced. So you would be able to operate on the Microsoft 365 cloud platform, but also locally with documents as well. So you are having that nimbleness of both having the hybrid cloud solution and being able to operate locally. And then in terms of moving over transition-wise with that, we do provide some training through the project and then can provide additional training after the project as needed as well.
Great. Thank you for making sense of that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and as the engineer in the room, I do want to make mention that when we produce these assessment reports, this is just to get the cards on the table for you to see what we're looking at, right? We are not dictating terms here. So whatever our suggested path is really the best practice. That's the bread and butter. That's what we're really, really good at. So here's that estimate, or here's what that will look like.
Any other questions? If not, we have a motion and a second. If I'm hearing no further discussion, we'll vote. Or John, did you have a question?
Sorry, I was just on process. I wanted to hear the presentation. That sounds great. I would just like to reiterate my point from the other night on process that while I love being briefed on this sort of stuff, and I think that that's super helpful for us, I do not personally think that it's that this requires our approval to go to bid. It requires our approval to enter into a contract once we see those bids, but my view, this is fully within our town manager's authority to do without us.
And my guess is that the town manager just wants to be extra cautious with, especially with, you know, this is not insignificant money, and we don't want anybody to come back and say you weren't notified or whatever. We didn't know about it, kind of thing. So I hear what you're saying, John. So having said all that, we're going to go to a vote. John.
Abstain.
Mary.
Yes.
Roger.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes.
I love process.
Okay, thank you, Tony and Carrie. Appreciate that. And thank you, Herb.
Thanks for the time, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm happy to answer further questions at another point if anyone has questions that come up.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to our Next agenda item. Oh my God, you guys, we might actually get out of here at a reasonable time.
Really?
We have an executive session to go to. Is anyone willing to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll do it. I move to enter executive session under VSA section 313A4 to discuss a disciplinary or dismissal issue concerning an appointed public officer and to invite the town manager to join said session.
Is there a second?
Second.
It was a tie. Mary made the motion. And I don't, John seconded.
Okay.
Any discussion? If not, we'll vote. John,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
and Claudette's a yes. So Roger's going to move everybody out into a separate room.
So Tony and Carrie, you guys can go home.
Or at least sign off if you're not home already. Thank you.
Will we need Miranda before I put her in a waiting room?
No.
Right.
There won't be any action afterward.
I don't
I
believe.
can track it even if there is, Miranda.
Okay. Ciao.
See you.
Bye.
Turn your mic off, Miranda.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Is there a motion to go back into public session?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob at 8:33. And as we mentioned, there's no action coming out of this meeting. So is there a motion to adjourn? Or actually,
We'll put a vote on.
Vote on the current motion.
Putting it to- Okay.
John, how do you vote? Back in public.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
and Claudette's a yes. Now, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by John. Any discussion? John, how do you vote?
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
I'd love to say, I want to pull a John, but I'm not gonna. Yes. Well, adjourning at 8:35.
All right. Well then, Madam Chair.
Back at you next week, budget only.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Hey, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I